All right, well, hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the HC Conversations podcast. My name's Phil, joined as always. I'm introducing you this time.
Okay.
By my buddy Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hi, I'm here.
What an intro. Hey, we're in a little series right now where we are talking about the story behind Hope Community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right. So today we're going to kind of backtrack a little bit because we didn't cover it in the last episode. If you didn't watch or listen to the last episode, go to either YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and you can, wherever you found this, you can watch the previous episode.
Yeah.
But we wanted to begin today by talking about why Hope Community, why another church in Minerva, Ohio, of all places.
Yeah.
And then kind of talk about some of the influences that we had, kind of like our philosophy behind Hope Community, and then kind of like, okay, what happened after that then?
Our philosophy behind Hope Community is a problem-free philosophy.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. My kids have had like
Lion
King on repeat for a couple of weeks now.
Hakuna Matata.
As soon as you said our philosophy, I'm like,
That's yeah. Our philosophy here at Hope Community is Hakuna Matata.
Okay.
That's it.
It's really? Because it doesn't always seem that way. Oh, yeah. Sorry for getting us off track there. But our philosophy. Yeah.
No, why?
Why?
We're starting with why. The
yeah.
why behind why we got started. So I guess I might as well because
I'm not in the right mental space apparently.
So why another church? Why a church in Minerva? And that's a question that we wrestled with because it's like, do we really need to leave and to start another church? Can we do what God has called us to do in the existing church that we were in? And we arrived at no, because that wouldn't be faithful to who God has called us to be. That wouldn't be faithful to the church that we were part of. Mm-hmm. And to what God had called that church to be.
Yeah.
And so we decided it was important for us to leave because we believe that people were looking for a church, people were looking for hope, but they weren't finding hope in the churches in our community.
Yeah, and so along with that, like you said, it wasn't that we didn't think we could do it at that church, but it had nothing to do with that church being bad or our way being right. It's very much like, use the word philosophy again. My philosophy, our philosophy kind of is like, we read in the New Testament that the church is a body, and we understand that within different like individuals a lot of times within the church. Like we have different gifts, we have different functions, we have different roles, but like I believe that's true as it relates to churches as a whole too.
Right.
Like in communities, like it takes all the different expressions and styles and forms that church takes on to really reach people. And it seemed like in our local community, it's like I think there's an expression that's missing, and we felt like we were called to go and to do and to be a part of. And like you said, we wrestled with that because there were a lot of churches.
We counted 23.
I was 20 something.
Greater Minerva area, so that would include the surrounding zip codes as well.
Yeah, the greater Minerva area, like it's so big. But yeah, so there's a lot of churches. Like you really couldn't go down hardly any street and not run into a church somewhere. But yet we still felt like there's something missing.
Right.
Yeah.
So that combined with the fact that at that time in kind of all across really rural America, the opioid crisis was hitting very hard. We had known some classmates that had died from opioid overdoses, as well as there were several teenagers that were killed in a car accident.
Right.
And it left the community kind of shaken and wondering, okay, is there any hope? And where can we go to find hope?
Yeah. And yeah, again, like, is there any hope? Where can we go to find hope? But not only that, but us feeling as though like we think what should be, but what wasn't, was that the first instinct or the thought of like, is there hope? Where do I go? Like when my world is shaken or when life is unsure, where do I go? And for most people, the initial thought is not, I need to go to a church.
Right.
That's not there. Those, as they say, those seeds aren't planted. And we thought that was a shame because like we believe that there is hope in the church because there's hope in Jesus and he works and he moves and he does things through his church. And so we're like, well, shoot, we need there to be a place that's not just for church people, right? Because church people know you go to church to find hope or to learn about Jesus or answer the bigger questions in life. And like, we're good. They've already got it figured out. They already know. But what about all the people that don't know? What about a church or a place it's not for them, right? In terms of like, discounting like church people, or like, because like the church is the body of Christ. You can't ever change that. So it's not that it's a church for people who aren't Christians, but it's a church that for people that aren't used to church or aren't people of faith or exploring or whatever could go, I feel like I've had these questions, or I do feel hopeless, or I'm looking for things. That's a place that I can go to find some answers. So that was kind of, I guess, the long way around. Some of the why.
Right. And to fast forward a little bit, we're not there yet.
No.
That's where we are going as a church. That's where we want to be, but we've got a lot of work to do until we get there.
And I don't know that we'll ever actually get there, because as the world continues to change and culture shifts and things are different, we constantly have to reevaluate. What doesn't change is like, okay, we think that hope is found in Jesus,
right?
And like we are the body of Jesus, but how do we continue to be an expression of the body of Christ and people that communicate the gospel message in a way that makes sense to people that weren't raised in it, that don't know it, that aren't just familiar with it. And so that's kind of always like our guiding, like true north of like, okay, this isn't about those of us that already know, that are already convinced, that already like, this is what we do, but like constantly like, no, it's not about us. It's not about us. It's not about us. So yeah, we're kind of at that place. 6 years ago now, almost 7.
Almost 7.
Yeah. 'Cause 6 years since the church started, but we had that year off in between, which is what we're going to get to in just a minute. But anything else, philosophy wise that we,
No, I think that we kind of answered the why behind.
yeah, I would just add a little bit.
Okay.
Just came into my mind. Like part of that too, it wasn't just born out of like simply bad things are happening and there's tragedy and there's hopelessness, because that almost really became the thing that really just pushed it over the edge.
It's like, we have to do this.
Yeah, there was, as if you listen to the last episode, several conversations of like, what's God doing? Because there was a lot of talk around like our peers, like our friends, people we went to school with, people we grew up with, our family members, a lot of people that's just like church, God, nah, like just not for me. And so again, like they're like, oh, there's got to be a place for them, because at the core of the Christianity thing is this thing called the gospel, and it just means good news. And whenever like you get any kind of good news in your life, whether it's, you know, like something family, something work, so like you just, what do you do? Like good news, everyone's like, yeah, I want to hear about that. I want to be a part of that. And it's like, but that's not the reaction that like our peers were getting when it came to church or Jesus. And we're like, well, if like this, the message of Jesus, the story of Jesus is good news, and people aren't hearing it as good news, let's do something about that.
Right.
And then the hopelessness thing really came to like, okay, like we've got to, people need this good news. And kind of side note, that's honestly how the name of the church came about. Like I remember that conversation, like you and I were talking, like, well, what's this thing going to be called?
Name it?
And it's like, well, we know that hope is that like we want people to have hope. So like it's got to be something that communicates hope. And we also know that it's not just about a church service, but it's about people in a community and being for our community. So we want hope and we want community. And I remember you saying like, well, why not just Hope Community? Yeah. I'm like, brilliant.
So like we have to have church in the name. Like, no, we don't.
But everybody always tries to put church in the name though, too.
People have come up with many different names. Hope Church.
Hope Church.
Hope Community Church. We're none of those. We're Hope Community. Church is nowhere in any of our legal documents in terms of what this organization has been named.
Yeah.
So you can call us that.
You can.
We're not going to get mad at you, but our official name is actually Hope Community.
Hope Community. I mean, part of that too is just I feel like church is intrinsic when you actually really understand what church is. It's the community of faith, and that's
the gathering of
Hope Community is a church because there's a community of Jesus people gathered here. Anyway.
Right. And so let's then move into like some of the influences behind this church and getting started. So one of the first times that I went to a thing called the Orange Conference. So Orange is a family ministry strategy that we use as a church. That
love it too. It's awesome.
That we had been using at a previous church, and they have a big conference every year down in Atlanta with thousands of people. And it is the most fun conference that you will ever go to. You will learn a lot. You'll be challenged a lot, but you will also laugh a lot.
Like to the point where the next day your abs are sore, kind of laughing. You're like, oh my gosh.
But it's a really good conference, and they bring in speakers from all over the world to talk about ministry philosophy and how to partner with the next generation, partner with parents. That what happens at home is even more important than what happens at the church. So as a church, we're going to partner with the parents because parents have so much more influence over a kid's life than what a church ever will have.
Yep.
And so going to that conference for the first time and hearing all of that and seeing that the church could be different.
Yeah.
That it didn't have to be what we just did on a Sunday morning, that we could do things to inspire faith in the next generation throughout the week. I know kind of really lit something in me and got me to see that, wow, like there is permission to do church differently.
Yeah. I say, like, for me too, same thing, same conference, except it was like a year or two before you went for the first time. It was just like, whoa, church doesn't necessarily have to be like this stale, boring, and again, that's not to say one version or form of church is better than the other. Because here's one of the really cool things about like the Orange Conference. You show up and it's like the speakers, but then also the conference attendees span different countries around the world. They span all different denominations and things. I mean, there's non-denominational, and there's Baptist, and there's charismatic, and then there's Reformed people there, and there's like I've even seen like some Catholic priests there. They got their little clerical collars and stuff, and it's like, so it's cool, like the big picture of the church that you get. And so there is this idea of it's not about like style or methodology or whatever. So there was a sense of like getting a bigger picture of the church, and just the sense of like faith can be alive and it can be fun. Like fun is a value. Like fun was God's idea. Right. And so like the church should be the most joy-filled, fun. I mean, like, hey, like, yeah. So anyway, yeah, but like seeing the different perspectives of the realness of faith, and not just like in a personal way, but the way that you bring that into church and how you do ministry and how you structure things and how you talk to people, how you engage with people who aren't part of the church. And so there's like the very practical nature of things too. Like, hey, faith isn't just high and lofty and intellectual, but it's really practical. Right. Makes a difference in your life. Yeah. So a lot of that came through the influence of the Orange Conference. And so like you were kind of getting at, that definitely trickled into how we, like, this is the kind of church we want to be, right? And especially as it relates to next gen kids, students, like partnering parents, right? An extreme emphasis on small groups over like programming, right? On community, on building relationships with other people. Yeah, it's like you want kids, students, but even into adults. It's like we don't just want to teach you something in a big like lecture hall setting. We want you to go sit in a group with 10 or 12 of your peers and a small group leader, and journey through life together while you're pursuing Jesus together. Like what happens in that environment, way more important than what happens when there's a speaker on a stage. Yep. And then like you said, and then partnering with what's happening at home, because like a lot of times, parents want to win as parents. I want to win. I'm a parent. You're a parent. It's apparent that we're parents. But sometimes it's just like, I just don't know what to do, especially when it comes to like a faith conversation. I'm a pastor, and sometimes I'm like, what do I do with my kids? Right? But we want to be like, hey, as a church, here's what we talked about. Here's how you can continue the conversation at home. Here's like, we want to resource you. And all of that comes from, the influence of Orange Conference. Right. So. And it helps us to see that as a church, we can be really intentional about what we're doing across every phase of a kid's life. That they're not disconnected, that they work in tandem. And so whenever it comes to like our preschool and our kids ministry, we're laying a foundation for faith. And that we build from there. We're not teaching the entire Bible to kids, because the Bible, while it's equally inspired, it's not equally applicable. Right. So we're going to teach those things that are most applicable to kids' lives at that particular stage. We want to build on it. It takes a lot of pressure off too. So you don't, like in those settings, feel the need to like, I have to teach this 6-year-old everything he or she's ever going to need to know for the rest of their lives about faith. It's like, no, we'll have them next year and the year after and the year after. We're going to build. We're going to build. So that was one influence. And another influence came through a book called Deep and Wide that many of us, Phil's humming the song. Deep and wide. There's a fountain flowing deep and wide. There's a fountain flowing deep and wide. It was written by a pastor, Andy Stanley, from North Point Community Church. And it was all about how their church kind of got its start and their philosophy behind ministry. And it was just such an inspiration because yes, like they are a church that originally like their mission was to be a church that unchurched people love to attend. Yep. It's like, that's kind of what we need here in Minerva. A church that unchurched people love, that they want to come to, that they want to bring their friends to, even if they don't believe everything that the church believes.
And so looking at kind of their ministry philosophy and hearing him speak at conferences and actually visiting their church and one of their campuses, Gwinnett Church, and just again that intentionality that we saw in Orange carried out in every part of the church, from the decor to the messaging on stage. It's really powerful.
Yeah, especially as it relates to and again, we definitely, we talk about our church journey. Don't want to communicate that we're getting this right. We're just knocking it out of the park. It's it's a learning process, and this has given us ideas and inspiration in certain areas, but just the intentionality around everything, like you said, especially when it comes to the Sunday corporate worship gathering experience. It's that's not just about the worship, and it's not just about the preaching. It's no, the second you pull onto the parking lot, from the way that you're greeted to the way that kids get checked, the whole thing is just there's nothing that's an afterthought. Yeah. And just seeing that and being whoa, we want that kind of a sense of excellence. And excellence is not perfection,
right.
And it's not this big elaborate. It's it's looking at, this is what we have to work with. We will do the absolute best with what we have to work with. Kind of being in and around church for a long time, the church is not known for that. The church is known for that's good enough. Exactly. It's good. It's the church. It's good enough, right? People should just realize it's good enough because their heart's in the right place. And I'm I feel that's actually very counter to the gospel, because Jesus didn't just offer, it's good enough for us. It was no, he's no, I'm going to give you the best. I'm going to offer myself. And so we want to kind of follow that. And like you said, we saw that patterned in North Point and the one campus, Gwinnett Church, which is the church that launched all the for stuff. If you've ever seen churches that do we're for our community, we have a giant banner on the side of our building that says we're for Minerva. That got started, Gwinnett Church,
right,
for Gwinnett. And so we're yep, we're gonna embrace that for sure. And this, again, coming back to the idea of it's not just about us,
right?
We want this community to know we are for them. We are for them,
right?
Because God is for them, and we're God's people, so we're gonna be for them too,
right?
Yeah. Anything else on that particular?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So yeah, North Point, Gwinnett Church, Orange.
And there've been others as well along the journey, but they all kind of fit in a similar
ministry philosophy
of
yeah,
we're going to do things with excellence. It's not just about, we're going to do things with excellence, but also knowing it's not just about production. It's about deep relationships. We're going to drive everything to discipleship within the context of a smaller group of people.
Right.
And then that guiding principle or North Star of it's not about us, right? We're we are here. There's this tension that you walk, because it's people say, well, it's not about us. It's about our community and those around us and those that we want people to love Jesus. It's well, do you not care about people who are part of your church then? Because that's sometimes
right.
And it's no, actually it's the opposite. Because if you've ever been a part of a church or community of faith that is about, that recognize it's not about us, it's actually within that context of being others focused that God does something in your life and your faith grows more than if you intentionally just focus on, yourself. So yeah, all that coming together.
Yeah. So those are our influences. And then part of our story is also coffee. So I can remember it was 2015.
Okay. Can I pause for a minute?
Okay.
This is the first episode we've recorded where we do not have cups of coffee right now. And we're going to talk about coffee. And I just want the people at home to know we're not being hypocritical here. It's just we're recording this at a different time of the day. Normally we record this in the afternoon, so that's our afternoon cup of coffee time.
Okay.
This is kind of late morning right now when we're recording this. And
We've
already had our morning coffee. So it's just a timing issue.
Our coffee with our muffins.
Yeah, we had some leftover muffins that were at church yesterday, and there were 2 left. It was perfect. We went splitsies.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we will have the proper amount of coffee today.
So Phil and I got together at a coffee shop in Louisville called Uptown Joe. And they got this cool little room where they had some games and some couches and stuff. It's just a nice little place to sit down, to dream about the church, to start planning what Hope Community was going to be. I can remember 2 things about that conversation. Number one, I had just started dating my wife in September of that year. And I told Phil, I'm pretty sure at that get together that I was going to marry her. She just didn't know it yet.
Creepy.
And then also you were hey, what if we started a coffee shop too?
It's like, yeah, this is great because like coffee brings people together, and we want to be about community.
Right.
We want people like following Jesus, and I'm like, oh, this is like, and then like people can just wander in. Like, I'm just here for a cup of coffee, but I'm going to stay for the Jesus part, and it's great. Let's do it. And you're like,
Okay. Because there was a church that was doing that. It's called Jitters Church down in Millersburg.
Yeah.
Also led to another church called Holy Ground.
Broken Grounds.
Broken Grounds.
Broken Grounds. Yeah.
Church doing a similar thing in that community.
Shout out to Herschel.
And so we were really excited about that because it seemed like a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had some really good coffee at the Orange Conference from Phoenix Roasters.
Oh.
So we're like, hey, we're going to the Orange Conference next year. Why don't we just see if we can meet up with those guys and talk to them? So fast forward, it was almost conference time, and Phil reaches out to the guys at Phoenix and says, hey, this is who we are. Do you mind if we come down a day early and just stop by the roastery and
pick your brains a little bit.
Yeah, pick your brains about
get to know you.
So we did. And we
gosh.
stopped by the roastery and met our
And the rest is history.
It kind of is. Our wonderful friends, Brian and Greg.
And a whole crew of them now.
yeah,
But yeah, those are the first two we met. Yeah.
And I don't even know where to start there because, yeah, it is like the rest is history. But just these guys, just so welcoming and loving and just off the wall kind of crazy.
Okay, yeah.
Like in a southern kind of crazy guy.
God, do you have like kind of like a crazy fun uncle? I mean, but also very wise.
Yes.
Right? Like a lot of fun, a lot of laughing, a lot of did he really just say that? But then like all of a sudden just boom, like just nugget of wisdom.
Yeah.
That's like, oh. We'll get back to that part, but like I just remember specifically, I think the next year, maybe the year after, because we meet up with them at least once a year now when we go down to conference. And, it was just in the early days of the church, hard. Things were hard. Like, I'm not seeing any progress. We're not doing anything. And I remember a conversation with Brian. He talked about, when they dig these giant tunnels that like go through mountains.
I think he was actually talking about digging the Channel in England.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And he's like, and they dig from both sides. And you're just digging and you're digging and you're digging. And it doesn't seem like you're making any progress. But eventually the two sides come together and it's finished. And he was like, don't forget that you're digging, but God's doing something on the other side too. And I was just like,
yeah.
I'm like, we were here for the conference. We can go home now. Cause like, I just needed to hear that from Brian.
I mean, just like you saying those words again, I just like felt something inside of me, just taking me back to that moment when he said that to us.
A lot of fun, kind of crazy, but then like, just like very, like just wisdom, godly men, all of them then. Cause then we met, we can't even list all of our friends from Phoenix, that we've gotten a chance to know over the years. Anyway, back to our first meeting with them though.
So they're like, hey, we're going over to set up at the arena. You want to give us a hand? Because it was the day before the conference. So we're like, sure, we don't have anything else to do. So we went over and we helped them set up. Mind you, we paid to go to the conference.
Yes, that's an important note because in years following, we've gotten to go to conferences for free. We've said we're going to volunteer with them. So you work and you get to attend the conference as well. This time we were actually paying attendees. We paid for the conference. We paid to get down there. We paid for a hotel.
And we ended up volunteering the whole time. Now, granted, we did get to go to some sessions, but we volunteered a lot.
We basically paid to volunteer for 4 days. We couldn't get away. Not like in a bad way. Like we wanted to be with them.
Yeah,
so it's great.
We had great conversations, and we learned some good things about coffee. We learned about their story, how they partner with missionary farmers in their countries, Guatemala and Panama. Honduras, and now Ethiopia.
Yeah.
I got some
They're
Ethiopian at
expanding a
home there.
little bit.
Ethiopian is actually really good.
That's nice.
I really like it. Really
It's all
smooth.
natural process.
Yeah, it is natural process.
I like it, natural, this is off topic. Natural process coffees, they're not like an everyday coffee.
No, they're not. It's like, ooh, I want something special.
It's like, it's like in the evening, I'm like, I need a little razzle dazzle coffee,
Bougie coffee.
It's like get that bougie coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, so learning their story about how they got started, how they partner with these missionary farmers, how they pay the coffee farmers far more than what fair trade actually pays, so that way they can then in turn pay their workers a living wage.
Because they do not just fair trade, they do direct trade. They work directly with those farmers. And that was kind of the first time too, like kind of hearing it's like, fair trade is very much a buzzword, but when you actually see what's behind it and how many times the coffee exchanges hands
Right.
and how much the actual workers growing the coffee really get paid down the line, you're like, well, this sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they're like doing direct.
It's not
shit,
actually fair when
Yeah.
it comes down to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, learning their story and learning all that goes into the coffee and the missionaries that they're then sending out from these farmers around the world. And then Greg was like, we're going to Panama in June.
You guys want to go to Panama?
You guys should come with us. So I had a passport at the time. Phil did not have a passport, but we said yes.
We're like, okay.
And so you had to get an expedited passport.
Yeah, because like Orange Conference where we were at, it's the last like weekend of April into May. Okay, so this is the beginning of May when we get home, and they were leaving in like
It's
mid-June. So we had like 6 weeks. I had no passport. I had never flown on an airplane. I've been out of the country. I've been to Canada for like an 8th grade field trip or whatever. But we're like, sure. No, so that's crazy. And we're going to go out of the country with some people that we've only known for like 48 hours. Could possibly go wrong. Well, nothing, but yeah. So it was crazy, but like it just seemed like we need to do this. We got to go. So,
Yeah.
Panama.
There's so much we could talk about at Panama.
That's
but
like almost a separate episode.
it was just such a transformative experience to go down to Panama to meet the Caballero family and to hear their story firsthand of the work that they're doing, to be able to work on housing for their indigenous workers, the first housing of its kind in Panama for indigenous peoples with electricity and running water and plumbing, was just incredible. And the people that we got to meet and relationships we got to build, the fact that we have a family and a farm in Panama now, the Caballero family,
some of them were at Orange Conference this year.
I know.
And it was so good to see them. So good. Because it's been years. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, like
We got to go back to Panama soon.
They said whenever we went that, you will always have a family and a farm in Panama. And they meant that.
I know. Like as Americans, that's something we say, but we don't mean.
We don't actually mean. But
they mean it.
Every time we've run into the Caballeros now, because they'll come to conference on occasion, and it's such a surprise. And it's just like, it is like seeing family. They keep up with like what our families and what our church is doing.
How our kids are doing.
They're just incredible. So that influence from Phoenix Roasters, and then what we wanted to do with the coffee. So we set out. We're like, okay, we're going to start a church and we're going to start a coffee shop.
So we coffee shop during the week. We're gonna do church on Sunday. Be great.
And so we started out. We tried doing that, and we were able to raise awareness for the backpack program.
Oh yeah.
And we were wanting to donate whatever profit we had off the coffee back into our community to do good things.
Yes.
So we donated, I forget how much, to the backpack program, and really kind of got awareness off the ground for that. And eventually we had to stop doing coffee because it was taking our focus off what we had started out to do, which was to plant a church.
Yep.
It was a ton of work.
Oh yeah.
And it wasn't doing what we had intended it to do, which was to kind of be a place where people could gather for conversations, where maybe they showed up on a Sunday morning like, I get my cup of coffee here. I'm just going to, stick around for church.
Right. It's one of those things where we would eagerly and gladly say, like, yeah, we were wrong about the coffee shop. Yeah. We learned a lot from it. It provided, like, some good opportunities. Like, I wouldn't trade kind of what we learned, but it didn't do what we wanted it to do. Like you said, it was meant to be like a kind of a community gathering space where people could kind of get a first touch with the church, or people could come in, they could sit, they could enjoy the atmosphere, except nobody did that. A lot of people kind of came in and got coffee, but it was like always to go.
Right.
And so it's like, well, it's not building that sense of community. And like you said, it's way too much work. It was like, I mean, we were only open 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And it was like, this is insane trying to do that and do the church stuff.
Yep. So
and push kind of came to shove, and it was like, well, God called us to plant a church, and we thought coffee would be an avenue to doing that, but we were wrong. So we got to stick with what God has called us to do. Now, coffee's still very important to who we are as a church. I mean, like we'll still do, like, sometimes people will ask us to cater coffee for like community events or like private things, or even like sometimes like over at the schools, like, oh, it's teacher appreciation, let's take some coffee over. We still do that. Oh, and we definitely have coffee on Sunday mornings, right? Like
we still serve the good Phoenix Roasters.
Oh yeah, we do. And that's like and we like champion that all the time. So it's still part of our story, but just not
not
It's not as
as a major
central as we
role.
thought it
Yeah.
would be. So yeah, we learned
Yep.
that for sure.
Yep. So that was one of the things that we had started out with. So after we kind of now transitioning to the second part of kind of this conversation, or third or fourth part of this conversation, whatever.
It's meandering.
So our influences, the coffee. After we left, then we started going around to a lot of other churches because we said we were going to take a year off before we started this church to learn, to prepare. I forget our 3 Ps: to pray,
We're gonna prepare, we're gonna pray, and we're gonna perspire.
we're going to work on
Put
it.
the work in.
So we
3
definitely
Ps.
did that. We went around to a lot of churches. We
We
learned.
church hopped for a year.
It was fun. It was interesting. We learned a lot of what not to do.
There were some good experiences. There were some really bad
Really
ones
bad
too. And we're like,
experiences.
not doing that. But in that though, like, you know, we said that there were some influences that we had in North Point, Orange, but then also we found that there were a couple of local churches that it's like, this feels like what God's calling us to do, more specific to our context.
Right.
And those handful of churches we ended up visiting several times
Right.
during that year off. So it's like 1 week we'd go to a church we really liked, and then a week or two visit a couple other ones. Then we go to a different church we really like, and so we kind of keep coming back to those handful. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So that was a fun experience.
It was.
Also during this time, we were filling out lots and lots of paperwork. So, you know, because it's the government, there's no clear process. So you fill out one form and send it to like the Secretary of State, and they send you a letter that says, you know, thank you. Now you also need to submit this form to the Attorney General and pay this fee. And so there's a lot of that back and forth. We had to write a lot of documents like our Constitution, bylaws.
You know those things that you make and never look at again?
Yeah. So some really, you know, fun documents that we had to
yeah.
write. Filing for the nonprofit status, that was a big job. And then
Yeah, that was
after
like a secondary thing then, right?
yeah.
Because
So churches are automatically considered a nonprofit, but we wanted to
but they're not an official 501c3.
Right. So
And
once
we
we
wanted to be, yeah.
once we had our nonprofit status, the next thing that we wanted to do was file for our 501c3 status.
That took like a year.
It was a long process, and then they sent paperwork back and said, you know, could you clarify this line on this page of the document and supply
Yeah.
this documentation? So a
Well,
lot of doing that.
And usually when nonprofits or churches, organizations decide they want to be a 501c3 organization, they go to a lawyer who does like specialize in that, and they write up their stuff for them. We were a church plant, and we had we did not have a few $1,000s. So we're like, okay. And so Paul did like most of the legwork on that. He'd work on it, come in on a Monday and be like, okay, let's go over it. What else do we need? And he'd go work on it some more. And this, like I said, it was like a year-long process.
Hey, our filing fee was only like $600 and some dollars,
yeah.
as
So,
opposed
yeah,
to thousands.
So we still had to pay the filing fee, but no middleman. So that
Yeah.
was
So that was a joyous process.
it was joyous. But hey, we are.
We
official.
are official 501c3, not just a
Yeah.
nonprofit.
Yeah. So anyway,
So
not fun.
no, so the paperwork wasn't that fun, but it was very important, very foundational to actually moving into the next stage. Also during this time, we were looking for a location.
Location.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which because of my, genius idea to say, we're going to do a coffee shop too. We really couldn't just open up a church as like portable church. Like a lot of church plants be like, hey, we're going to rent space on a Sunday. We'll do set up, tear down, in a school or a theater or wherever. But it's like, well, we need to have a, like an actual presence because we're going to be a coffee shop during the week. And so, yeah, that was, and also a space that couldn't just feel like a church, but we needed to function as something else. And so we looked at several buildings, one of which is now torn down.
Yeah.
Another of which is something else in the downtown area. We're like, maybe we want to be a downtown, because coffee shop downtown, let's do that. Yeah, super grateful that we didn't get either of those places because I feel like we're right where we need to be.
Right.
But yeah, the looking for a building was rough.
It was painful.
Because it was,
because
because this is all of 2016 we're planning. And we know that 2017, church is coming.
Right.
And we're opening in January of 2017. And we've kind of already started to promote that. And we started promoting that in a date for opening. And we didn't have a building.
No, we didn't have a building.
So we're like, we got to find a building. What are we going to do?
We were really praying.
Oh, we were praying hard.
Asking God to provide a place. And that would lead us to kind of the next section of our conversation.
I'll say he did.
He
We're
did.
going to find out about that next
We're going to find out
week.
next time.
No, next month. We only do this once a month.
That's why I said next time.
Next month. The October edition of the HC Conversation podcast.
So that was kind of a jumble of of a bunch of different thoughts, but really kind of important things that really lay the groundwork for Hope
Yes.
Community and where we're going next time.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us for this edition of the HC Conversations podcast. If you like what you're hearing, go ahead and share this episode with a friend or previous episodes.
Yeah.
And maybe join us on a Sunday morning.
That'd be great.
Yeah. I look forward to seeing you sometime at Hope Community, but also seeing you online.